In this tutorial, we're going to configure network load balancing in a home lab using VMware. We're going to use 4 virtual machines for this setup. If you have followed our previous lab, I've actually added a further 2 virtual machines to our network. So 2 member servers, Windows Server 2012, and I've added both of these into our domain. We also have a client machine here that we're going to use later to test to make sure network load balancing is working as expected. Now, if we flick over to VMware, we'll see we have MEM2 and MEM, our 2 member servers. I've already installed the network load balancing role on both of these servers. Actually, network load balancing is actually a feature, not a role. Sorry, so I've installed the network load balancing feature. I've also installed the web server IIS role on both of these servers. Now, the reason for this was I needed some sort of visual representation to show network load balancing actually working. So we're going to use web server IIS role for that. So we're going to be able to, using our client machine, we're going to be able to demonstrate visually exactly what happens and what server our client machine will access and what happens to that client machine if that server goes down. We're going to go straight over to Network Load Balancing Manager, and we're going to click here on Network Load Balancing Clusters, and we're going to create a new cluster. So a cluster is a collection of our servers which are going to, as mentioned, share the load. So if you can imagine you've got 1,000 client machines accessing the one server demanding to see a website, that server could easily become overloaded. It can cause problems. If we throw another server into the mix or into the cluster, then 500 of those client machines can go to one server and request services, and 500 of the other client machines can go to the other server to request services. So again, they're sharing the load. So I'm going to add this very machine into, of course, as part of the top of this cluster. So this is MEM2, and if we click connect, we will see the network adapter from MEM2. Now, Microsoft do recommend using 2 network adapters when using network load balancing, and there are very valid reasons for that. But in a lab environment, you're okay just to choose the one at the moment. So if we configure the defaults, now we need to add an IP address for the actual cluster itself. So what happens is, if one of our client machines wants to access one of these servers, it will send a request to the cluster IP address rather than the IP address of the actual machine itself. So the cluster IP address needs to be in the network range, of course, of your virtual machines. So we're in the 10 network, so it's 10.0.0, so our domain controller is 10.0.0.1, and both MEM and MEM2 are in that same network range. So just to make sure I don't use an address I've already used, I'll go for something. So we'll go for 10.0.0.199, and then make sure your subnet mask is correct and matches the other machines, and I think we're good to go. So if we click OK, click on next, we're going to choose multicast here, and for the full internet name, so this is the sort of DNS name, if you will, of your cluster. So I will call it cluster.down. Okay. Click on next, and now this is choosing the ports. So what traffic can be directed to the cluster, basically. So as it stands, there is a default setting, which is pretty much everything. So again, in a production environment, that may not be something you want to choose, but for the purposes of this lab, again, that's absolutely fine. So when we click finish here, so what this is going to do is it's going to test this machine and make sure everything is correct, and it's going to begin to converge this machine. And what that basically means is, when we add the next server, it converges both and ensures that they're both working together, they both can contact each other, and if everything goes green, as we see here, then this means network load balancing should be working and should be, ready to share services. So okay, so we need to add our second host into our cluster now. So if we click on here and add host to cluster, and if we put in the name of the second member server, which is MEM, and we click connect, and it will find that machine. You can see here that something I missed when setting up the first one. So the priority basically means if you are not using a sort of load balancing sharing situation, that you can choose which machine will be the go-to machine. So which machine will the client machine access? And if you have the lower the number, the higher the priority. So for MEM2, that has a unique host identifier of 1, and for MEM this will be 2, so MEM2 will be the machine that will be the prominent machine here. So if we click next here, and again we configure the defaults, and then all going well, we will see green and we'll have full convergence, and then we can begin to test this to see if it's actually working as we would expect. Okay, we can see now that we have convergence, so both machines are fully connected to our cluster. We don't see any issues. You've got the little log down here, and if you don't see any red, it normally means everything's okay. Now the question is, how can we see this working? So if our client machine now connects into our domain, which of these machines is it using for various services? So as mentioned earlier, we installed the web services IIS role. So we're going to see if our client machine accesses the default IIS website, then which server is it going to hit? So at the moment it should hit MEM2 because that has the highest, or the lowest number, but the highest priority. So if we go into host properties here, we'll see the unique host identifier is 1, and with our second machine it is 2. So the lower the number, the higher the priority. So this client machine, when accessing services, should in theory access this server first, and if this server goes down, the client machine should not notice anything, but it should be flicked over to this server here, and we're going to actually show this working now. So the best way to do this is to go into our C drive and init pub www root, and this is the image, the default image for the default IIS web page. So if we double click this, and we're simply going to change something on this. So okay, so I'm not going to get too technical with this. I'm just going to put a wee box over the Windows Server icon here, and I'm going to save this on MEM2. And on MEM, I'm going to leave the web services IIS page exactly as it is. So it means that when we access the web server service from client machine, and we can do this through the browser, we will be able to see exactly which server it's using. So let's have a look at this in action. Okay, so now on our client machine, we're going to have a wee look and see exactly what server we're accessing here. So if we put in the IP address of the cluster, so remember when we created the NLB cluster, we gave that cluster its own IP address, which basically means that any client trying to access one of these servers will access a cluster IP address, and the cluster will then forward it to whichever machine, depending on what we have chosen in the settings. So if we go to the IP address of the cluster, it should direct us to one of our machines. So you remember earlier we changed MEM to the default image for IIS. Let's just go back and get this here. So you see we put a box around it. So what this tells us, and this is the way this is what we expected. MEM2 has the highest priority, so we expected that when client 1 accessed the cluster, it was going to be directed to this machine here, and we can confirm that by seeing that we are indeed accessing MEM2. So to see this working, if we now disable the network adapter on MEM2, so let's just do that just now. So if we disable this guy, okay, so now when client machine accesses the cluster, if we refresh this, and there we go. So we can see that we are now accessing MEM. We didn't change the default IIS image on MEM, so this shows this actually working. So when MEM2 went down, the client machine automatically was passed over to MEM. we didn't notice a difference. So as a user on a client machine, we would probably not notice anything was any different. But this is load balancing working, and we have confirmed that it's doing exactly as it should.